Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this travel skills-based Monday Night Travel. My name is Ben Green, and I have the great pleasure of being your host tonight. Now, I am so excited to explore accommodations in Europe and beyond with all of you and our special guest. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, I would like to introduce and welcome our guest, the Senior Deputy Editor of the travel media brand Afar, Jen Flowers. Hi, Jen.
Hi, good evening.
Thanks so much for being with us here on Monday Night Travel.
I am so excited to be here tonight.
And are you local, Jen?
Yes, I actually live on Orcas Island, which is just to the north of Edmonds, and my parents live in Edmonds, so I am quite familiar with this part of the state.
Yeah, so you didn't have to come very far, which is
Not at
wonderful.
all.
And you specialize, Jen, in hospitality and hotels, is that right?
Yeah, so I work at Afar, which is a multimedia travel publishing organization that has a magazine, we have a podcast, we have a website, and we're dedicated to enabling the world's best travelers to find deeper, richer, and more fulfilling experiences on their travels. And as the kind of resident hotel nerd, I oversee all hotels and hospitality for our travel media company.
That is amazing, and it makes you the perfect guest to have with us tonight.
Oh,
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ben.
Can you tell us a bit more about your travel and hotel routes? How did you get into this position?
Sure. Well, it's really interesting. So my hotel background actually started when I was born. My father is a hotelier, and he spent his time between the United States and Asia. And he was actually the managing director of the world famous Plaza Hotel in New York City, which you might know from the fictional character Eloise, who lived in the hotel. And we also had a very charmed experience where we got to live in the hotel as well. And so for me, hotels are more like a calling than a job. I feel like, when you stay at a hotel, it can be one of the most important decisions of your trip. Even though it might not be the focus of your trip, it is a huge part of the financial decision that you're going to make on your trip. And it'll also determine, like, it can make a break a trip sometimes. It can be, it can help you have an immersive experience. It can also help you leave a destination better than you found it as well, if you pick the right place.
That is very true, and we're going to discuss tonight a few of the topics that elaborate on that and show why a hotel or wherever you stay is so important to your trip. Yeah, thank you, Jen. And actually, although Rick is not here with us, he is going to be taking us through levels of accommodation in Europe, from hostels up to 3-star hotels. So we'll start with Rick. But before we go to him, you kind of touched on this, Jen, but I'm curious. Why is finding a place to stay, or a good place to stay, so important for a trip?
So again, I really do think it comes down to, first of all, it is a big financial decision, and where you choose to stay, the location, the purpose of your trip, and the place that you choose to stay can really have an impact on the outcome of your trip. You also, if you pick a place that's locally owned, you're often going to find these incredible insights into a destination. I think Rick Steves is especially good at finding those like really great pensiones and inns that are actually locally owned. And I think we might be hearing from someone later who actually owns a place, but it's just such a key part. Again, even if it's not the main part of your trip, it will end up impacting your trip. And so hotels for me are just so much more than places to stay. They really are, they are a way in, like, kind of a portal into your destination in a lot of ways.
I agree. Yeah, and we'll see why a good place to stay is more important than ever tonight as well. All right, let's turn it over to Rick.
Whether in a big city or a small village, your major expense each day is renting a bed. And you have lots of options. We'll review them from cheapest to most expensive. In rural settings, like here in Gimmelwald, I like simple, less expensive accommodations. Gimmelwald has a pension, a bed and breakfast, and a hostel. Europe has thousands of hostels, like Gimmelwald's Mountain Hostel, offering cheap dorm beds. While not for everybody, the price is certainly right. Rather than privacy in your own bathroom, you'll enjoy a convivial camaraderie, a helpful reception desk, a welcoming common room with lots of information and hiking partners, and the kitchen, where hostelers cook for the price of groceries. It's dinner time. And after a sunny day of hiking, travelers are sharing stories. Today, European hostels come in all shapes and sizes. Modern ones are often big and institutional. They come with inviting lobbies and modern facilities. Rather than the traditional large dorms, more and more hostels are offering smaller rooms, family rooms, and even doubles for couples. In cities or villages, the young at heart of any age are entirely welcome. A great thing about hosteling, especially if you're going solo, is gaining an instant circle of friends.
Have you stayed in many hostels, Jen?
Oh my goodness, have I, especially in my 20s. And actually, when I lived in Italy, I studied abroad in Florence. And hello, Heather, one of my, actually my roommate from Italy is watching tonight. She and I stayed at a number of really fun, interesting hostels. One was in Venice, and I think it was run by nuns. And I think we had to be out of the hostel by 6 a.m. every morning and in by 10 p.m. or we'd be locked out. And it was just such a fun kind of slice of life of what Venice is truly like in a place that's so over touristed sometimes. To find that like right hostel that makes it just kind of like, oh yeah, this is like what it's like to be like, you know, a nun living in Venice and running a hostel. It was just so interesting. So we didn't mind the 10 p.m. curfews at all. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I have similar experiences. Now that I'm closer to 30, I think that I maybe don't want to stay in hostels as often. But when I was a little younger, not that I'm not young, but you know, when I was closer to 20, hostels were excellent. I loved all the opportunities that they provided, and there's so many different vibes to hostels, right? Each one is different. There's different character. Some are like known for parties, some are quieter. People maybe stick to themselves a little bit more. I can remember making paella with the workers of one hostel. I can remember, well, of course, beer games and so many other things. Just wonderful experiences. And many of the friends that I made in hostels, I am still in touch with today.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah. Now, Jen, one common question that we get in the travel center is related to age, staying in hostels. Do you know, in your experience, are there age limits with hostels?
You know, I actually am pretty age agnostic in terms of hostels. I think it's a great place to connect on passion points rather than price points. A lot of people are interested in just meeting other people. There's like a convivial vibe to hostels that I think you can enjoy at any age. I do think the shared accommodations might be a little tougher for me personally, who's a more seasoned traveler. But there are hostels now that offer private rooms and quieter environments. So if you do your research and kind of go through a Rick Steves guidebook or kind of vet it online, you're going to find something that is suitable to your travel experience or travel style, as it were.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's, yeah, I agree entirely. You know, there's this type of hostel in Germany called Jugendherberge. My German pronunciation on that may not be quite right, but it's this youth hostel, it literally means youth hostel system that exists throughout the country, that's from the post-World War II era. And it's just simply known as a popular German place, basic facilities, but clean, well-run, for people of all ages, from little kids to grandparents, to be able to stay. So that's just one example of a common hostel type that you see in Europe. And the array of hostels, as we've mentioned, is just huge, isn't it? There's so many different varieties.
It's so true. It's absolutely true.
And reviewing reviews online is a great way to kind of figure out, you know, what type of hostel is this? Yeah, that's really important since the range is so great. Yeah. Well, I think next we'll hear from Rick for B&Bs.
For me, B&Bs offer an ideal combination of comfort and economy, privacy and cultural experience. Every country has private rooms for rent. You just got to know the local word. Husrum is Norwegian, for chambre d'hôte, which is French, for Zimmer, which is what they say here in Switzerland, for bed and breakfast. B&Bs give you more than just a good night's sleep. Imagine enjoying a renovated attic with a view of this small-town Czech castle. Being a guest in a home rebuilt after a civil war in Dubrovnik. Savoring the salty ambience in the captain's house on a Danish isle. Or being a noble for a night with Giorgio in the heart of Tuscany. Okay?
What is quite often...
Tonight, we're sleeping in the home of Ollie and his wife Maria. They teach in the village and supplement their income by renting out 3 rooms in their home. As is generally the case with B&Bs, the rooms are as comfortable as a hotel, but homier. While you're living in someone else's home, you can be as private as you like. Just take the key and do your own thing. Or you can go downstairs and get to know the family.
This yellow cliff over there.
Yeah.
That's where the eagle has each year its nest.
Typically, hosts enjoy sharing. Ollie knows the backside of the Jungfrau intimately.
And the young birds in early spring, you see them starting to learn to fly.
pensions are a good value.
Actually, before we get to pensions, Jen, is it true that B&Bs are mainly a Anglo-Irish term? Do you know?
Yeah, B&Bs, I think you typically hear more in the sort of Anglo-Irish world, and then you get to the pensione in on the continent as well, which is kind of a similar concept where you have a local owner, and there's more of like kind of like residential kind of vibe, like kind of house feel. But there's a similar product basically when you're staying at one, for sure.
That makes sense. I honestly didn't know that.
A pension is a place without many of the services you'd expect in a hotel. This one's inexpensive, with the toilet and shower down the hall. The bedrooms are well worn and traditional, and the place creaks just the way you want it to. And once again, humbler places seem to foster community.
Have you stayed in many pensions, Jen?
Oh, yes. I actually had a wonderful trip to Le Marche, Italy, which is a little bit less of a touristed part of the country, and stayed at Agriturismi, which are kind of like a pensione adjacent, and just had the most amazing time. To Rick's point, you have local owners who are able to showcase the destination for you in a way that a big corporate hotel never could. I mean, you are like, oftentimes they're multi-generational families owning these homes or pensioni, and there's usually characters. I remember this other pensione I stayed in Florence, where the owner, the proprietor, was very, very outspoken and opinionated about my own life and giving me personal advice. So it's just a fun, I mean, talk about immersive. You can't get more immersive than a pensione.
Yeah, yeah. We will go to the city next.
In a major city like this, you have lots of hotel options. The neighborhood you choose, as well as the hotel, shapes your experience. Many travelers opt for the big, international class hotels outside the historic center. I find that these, while very comfortable, build a wall between you and the people and culture you traveled so far to experience. I prefer a small-scale hotel in a cozy neighborhood. For example, the area around Rue Claire is a pedestrian-friendly bit of Village Paris, a 10-minute walk from the Eiffel Tower. Accommodations are a classic example of how spending less can actually give you a richer experience. Europe's big cities still have well-located, characteristic hotels at an affordable price.
Now, Jen, my understanding is that hotel prices are on the rise. There are still some deals out there, but have you found this to be true?
My goodness, last year, Europe hit record numbers in terms of occupation, like occupancy and also price. It is more expensive to run a hotel than it ever has been, and the demand was so strong that it did definitely drive up prices. The silver lining is that this year, experts are saying it is going to slow down a little bit. So I think we'll get a little bit of a break, but it does mean that we have to kind of have a value mindset when we're looking at accommodations this year, like we do every year. I mean, Europe gets so popular. I think France and Italy are still topping the kind of lists where travelers want to go around the world. So if you're looking at kind of globally, like I think it's Italy, France, and Switzerland. So they remain popular. So you really have to start thinking smartly about how you kind of travel and when you travel.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And some of you may have noticed that this is a perennial video here. This is from a few years ago, but I think the information remains pretty relevant when you say very accurately presented by Rick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll carry on with hotels.
There's a range of categories. Many countries have helpful rating systems. In France, plaques with stars are posted by the door. In a well-chosen one-star place, budget travelers can sleep well and safely. Rooms are pretty basic, but come at near youth hostel prices. European cities have lots of night noise, and especially in cheap hotels, this can be a problem. Rather than paying a premium for a room with a view, I take a quiet room in the back. In France, two-star hotels offer for me a great balance of price and comfort. Still basic, but with good beds, private bathrooms, and often tiny but appreciated elevators. The more people who share a room, the less expensive it gets per person. A double costs just a little more than a single, and many hotels are happy to squeeze in a cheap third bed. While three-star hotels are more expensive, they can also be a good value. Here, you're paying for extras, like a lounge, room service, and all the comforts.
Now, it's one of our typical room with big TV, mini bar, iPod base, of course, air conditioning. It can be very useful, especially in August in Paris. Bathroom.
2 sinks.
Yes, 2 sinks. French people like it. And you can be 2 at the same moment in the bathroom.
Very nice. Know your priorities. This hotel's great, but those on a budget may need to choose between these extras for an additional $50 a night and a nice dinner, concert, or city tour.
There's some great tips here from Rick. I especially like the one he mentioned a short time ago regarding the fact that oftentimes hotels have quieter rooms in the back. Are there
Yep.
things you look for, Jen, when discussing a room with hotel? Like if you email them directly, for example, about their availability, do you ask them about a courtyard, a facing room, or any other tips? like
For
that?
sure. So I definitely, if you want a quieter room, you can always ask for something quieter with a courtyard. There is a benefit to booking in advance. If you have special requests, you don't want to leave it too long, especially in high season. If you want a certain type of room in a pensione or a hotel. And I will add, there's such great advice from Rick. I will add that there's a sweet spot right now in terms of like booking during shoulder season in Europe that will really offer some value. There are more seasonal hotels that are staying open a little bit later. So you have like they're opening a little bit earlier in the season before they get to high season in summer, and then they're staying open a little bit later. So you can grab onto some of those really good deals kind of outside of the peak periods if you can. So that's another thing, when you're looking for maximum flexibility in terms of room types, in terms of prices, I would really think outside of the box and think, okay, can we go a little bit later in the season, or maybe try, I know that Rick is a huge proponent of this, but trying maybe an off the beaten path destination that is kind of similar to what you're thinking about, but offers better value and just better room products and just like an amazing immersive experience where you're kind of outside of the kind of the tourist zones.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's excellent advice. Thank you, Jen. And actually, while we're on the 3-star hotels, I would like to point out to all of you, this is the most common level of hotel we use on Rick Steves tours. You might find an occasional 4-star as well, but 3-star is our kind of sweet spot for well-run, clean hotel with nice amenities.
Throughout Europe, small family-run hotels offer fine values. This London hotel is plush, beautifully located, and more affordable than you might expect because it has no elevator. This historic former monastery in Florence costs no more than a top-end chain hotel, but is bursting with Renaissance character. Here in Norway, you can enjoy feeling right at home on a fjord. And a favorite of mine in Rome, small enough where the owner can go over your sightseeing plans, provides fine rooms and a breezy conviviality you simply can't find in bigger hotels. Some travelers love the freedom of just finding hotels as they go. But to get the best rooms in the popular places, book in advance. Smart travelers use a savvy mix of guidebooks and the internet. Web-based review sites are popular and powerful, but while helpful, they can also be misleading, so be careful. And by the way, making reservations through web-based booking services may be convenient, but they cost your hotel 15 to 20%. I get the best price by booking directly through my hotel.
Thank you, Rick. More excellent tips there. Do you agree, Jen, with Rick's comments there on booking direct with the hotel?
Oh my goodness, I can't express enough how much of an advocate of booking directly I am. First of all, you have a direct relationship with a hotel, and this is kind of key. This is definitely what you want to do because that means you will get the best rate. If you see a better rate on an OTA, which is on online travel agency, usually the hotel will meet that rate or improve upon it. You also have a little bit more flexibility in terms of cancellations, upgrades. They're really going to be your advocate if you're booking directly because you have that direct relationship. It's like any kind of communication. When you're doing it directly, it's going to definitely pay off for sure.
Yeah, we definitely suggest you book direct as well. And in terms of where travelers find places to stay, what are your go-to resources for that?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, it's crazy how much how many things we can find on the internet now, and it's really helpful to sometimes just when you're thinking about going to a place, you can Google it, and you will find a lot of crowdsourced reviews, which is really helpful. But I still find that having reliable sources like a Rick Steves guidebook or a FAR, we have a certain kind of mindset that we bring to travel, and Rick Steves and a FAR actually were very similar in terms of finding those deeper, richer, more immersive experiences through local ownership, through like really kind of in the know, kind of off the beaten path places. So if that's what you want, if you go to a source that has done all the work for you, it's going to save you a lot of time surfing on the internet trying to find that right fit. So I would say expertise is key here still.
Excellent points, Jen. Thank you. Yeah. And even beyond our guidebooks, which are an excellent resource, there's also places like our travel forum on our website, ricksteves.com, where people have shared the hotels they've stayed at in the past and can offer their opinion as well. Now, Rick prioritizes value when finding accommodations. And you mentioned a few tips earlier. Do you have any other thoughts on how to find a good value accommodation?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting. Value can have a lot of different interpretations. And, when you're looking on the higher end of things and the sort of splurgier stays, I think, one important thing to keep in mind when we're traveling is we're different types of travelers on different trips and different parts of our trips, even sometimes. Sometimes we want just the good location, the lowest kind of price point that we can, but sometimes we want to splurge a little bit more. Maybe our dream is to stay in an agriturismo and we're willing to go a little bit kind of be outside of our budget to do that, or maybe like make things work so that that can kind of be a part of the experience. And splurgier stays can have a value proposition as well. You can look smartly for kind of splurge hotel deals as well, like where your money will go further, even though you're paying a little bit more.
Yeah, excellent point as well. When analyzing places to stay, Jen, what are your top considerations?
Oh my goodness. Well, definitely location. I'm a huge ancient Rome nerd, and so actually, so interesting. The one of the hotels that was featured just now in Rome, I've stayed there, which is crazy. I was just looking at it. I was like, oh my goodness, I love that hotel. It's like it was one of my first Rick Steves hotels, and that's when I fell in love with Rick Steves and the accommodation offerings that they have here. I was like, this is like the perfect. Like I kind of knew the proprietor going in, and I knew what the vibe would be, and there were no surprises, and I had this great experience. It's in such a great location. So location is key. Like, what are you planning to do in that destination? Vibe too. Like, are you looking for, are you willing to kind of like hear, like Rick was saying, hear those creaky steps and maybe have a proprietor who kind of gets in your business a little bit more. That kind of stuff really enriches travel. So like some people don't want that, but a lot of people do. So I do like to think about like, what kind of traveler am I on this trip? Am I willing to kind of like, I guess, trade on that sort of more corporate, like, okay, I know where the bed's going to be. I know what the coffee's going to taste like. For some people on some trips, on a business trip, that's great. Maybe on a kind of leisure trip, not so much. There's also Airbnbs, which is an interesting topic. I think it can be a great option for people who are traveling in groups. There are caveats around Airbnbs in more touristed places like Venice. It's actually kind of a little bit of a negative impact on they kind of price out local Venetians, and you're not it's kind of also disrupting the vibe a little bit of the city. So I think Airbnbs are a better option if you're outside of a major kind of touristed destination. But it is an option. It is a good option for a lot of people as well. So I think it just depends on my first question would be like, what kind of traveler am I on this trip? Like, what do I want to accomplish? Who am I traveling with? What my budget? Budget is so important. I think we can look at budget, and that's I think central, but yeah, like what kind of travel am I?
Yeah, that's important for sure, Jen. I think I would answer the question with a few points. Cancellation policy, I'm always looking at as well,
yes.
especially if I'm booking farther ahead. What else? Location is important. Breakfast. I like a good hotel breakfast. It's not a requirement. It depends on how I'm feeling at that time, but there's nothing like a good hotel breakfast where you don't have to leave the hotel to eat.
I love that you're a gourmand, because I am too. And I love that in Europe, it's a lot more common to have breakfast included versus the United States, where it's a little less common. But yeah, it's kind of one of the beautiful parts of traveling in Europe, I think.
Agreed. And for Airbnbs, I think you're exactly right. If you stay off the beaten path, Airbnb is less impactful. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. And for families, longer stays, it can be a great option. I'm going to ask you an essential question that I think many people may have. When should you reserve your accommodation for your trip?
Oh man, well, this is not the easiest question to answer because having spent a lot of my youth just kind of winging it, that's a really fun part of travel, to be able to kind of wing it and go to a place and just decide where you're going to stay for the night. I remember again going to Venice one time. I stayed in Mestre instead of Venice because we just couldn't find accommodations, and that's kind of part of the fun. However, I would say that when you're going to, if you're traveling in high season and in kind of a more touristed area, your destination, you will want to book in advance to have more control over, again, the type of room that you're going to get, the cancellation policy you should always kind of look at and see what you're comfortable with. But I think definitely booking in advance will give you maximum flexibility on price and type of room, and just like which hotel has room left. I think it will be a little bit competitive in Europe this year.
Right, right. I think generally, maybe there's some exceptions depending on where people are going and when, but generally I would say at least book the first few nights of your trip, right? So that when you land in Europe, you're not spending those jet lagged initial days finding a place to stay. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
my personal bare minimum.
That's a great recommendation. You can do a little bit of both. So you have a soft landing and then you can have your adventure when you're well rested and have a place to stay.
Yeah, yeah. And you think it's possible really to not book it all before you go? I mean, it just seems so unimaginable to me at this point.
I know. Yeah, I actually do think you can still do it. I mean, there's Hotel Tonight. I mean, there are ways to kind of do things in a pinch. Again, you might have to stay in a big chain hotel, and because pensiones and B&Bs, they tend to be a lot smaller, especially in high season. If they're on the kind of tourist radar, then all the rooms might be gone. But again, like sometimes winging it can be fun. So I wouldn't rule it out
Yeah.
for sure.
Thank you, Jen. That is an important topic to address. And next, we will actually view a few variations beyond Europe, if you're willing to share with us, Jen,
Oh,
some places you're
absolutely.
familiar with.
Yeah, so going back to this splurge conversation, I do think that you can maximize value while getting a little bit like kind of like spending a little bit more basically. And we wrote a article recently on afar.com about hotels that are $1,000 that look like they're $1,000 a night, but they're a fraction of the price. And we will share the website on the show notes, but I wanted to just share a few with you here just to give you a sense of where you're kind of how far your dollar can go. So one strategy is that we're leaving Europe now, but what you're looking at now is the Intercontinental Khao Yai in the hills of Thailand. Now, this is a very special property because it was built by a designer named Bill Bensley. Very prolific guy, and he created a hotel out of old train carriages. So if you're a train buff, this is a dream hotel for you. It's under $300 a night because you're in a region that offers a little bit of a softer price point for more splurgy stays. And look at this place. I mean, there's so much texture, so much kind of history, regional history, and you're in a beautiful part of Thailand. I love this hotel.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jen, that in certain locations, and I think Rick would agree as well, certain locations, a splurge is for the best, perhaps, or at least a better option, right? I know that when Rick goes to Egypt, which is a country he really loves, he does splurge a little bit there as well. This place looks excellent.
Yeah, this place is just beautiful. And we're back in Europe now. This is the Romelho Hotel, probably mispronouncing it because my Portuguese is very poor at this point. It's in Comporta, Portugal, and it's a former fisherman's home, now a 13-room boutique hotel by a famous designer with frescoes. I mean, you would think that this place goes for thousands a night, but it is under $300. And it was actually a find from a luxury travel advisor. All of these are coming from luxury travel advisors who book clients in at very high price points who are also using these amazing little steals of finds throughout the world.
Amazing. And again, these hotels are in one of the Afar articles, which we posted in the chat and will be included in a follow-up email.
Yes. And this next one, so this is Riyadh Zio. It's a Riyadh in Rabat, Morocco. And if you've never stayed in a Riyadh in Morocco, it's a very specific type of lodging. Privately run guest houses in Morocco, you can see that there's this beautiful tile work everywhere. I mean, Riyadhs to me are like jewel boxes, rather than hotels. I mean, when you stay in them, there are these you're just surrounded by kind of like like craftsmanship, and you can get them at a pretty decent price. I mean, Riyadh's in the Medina of Marrakesh and everything like this one is priced pretty well, but there's so many different options, and there's this kind of richness of there's again, it's like sort of the immersive experience that I love so much about this Riyadh. And I think there's a pool too. And then this one is Evolve Back Kamalapura. It's in Hampi, India. It's another one from this article, a really wonderful find that's under $300. I mean, look at it. It looks like a palace and it's under $300. It's filled with this Indo-Islamic architecture. I mean, talk about an immersive stay where the hotel is the destination unto itself. Like you almost don't want to leave. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, $300 in Paris will get you a central location perhaps, but maybe not something quite as incredible.
Exactly.
And next we will actually switch gears to one of my favorite types of accommodations, rural guest houses. Across many European countries, from Italy's agriturismos or agriturismi, like we have here, to agroturism, I believe is a rough pronunciation, in Croatia's Istria, to haciendas in Spain. Rural guest houses offer a more relaxed, slow-paced, local, enjoyable way to spend your time. And many offer wonderful experiences as well, as you will see here with this agriturismo. Have you stayed in, you mentioned you stayed in some earlier.
Oh, yes, I have. And I love agriturismi. They're beautiful accommodations. They're kind of working farms. So you get a kind of taste of rural life. And again, you have that great local ownership vibe and these beautiful breakfasts and these incredible, like I remember this beautiful breakfast I had in Le Marche where the sun was rising. I was trying olivia ascolane, which is this very regional food of like stuffed olives that are fried with like kind of a meat stuffing. I know you're a foodie, so I know you're gonna love that one. But just magical moments and unexpected like culinary and kind of local flavor. I love it. I absolutely love these agriturismi.
Yeah. One potential thing to keep in mind with them, right, is many of them require a car. Would you say that's true?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you definitely want to have some wheels when you're traveling into the countryside. It'll give you maximum flexibility and, give you more of an adventurous spirit. You can kind of go anywhere with a car, which is kind of fun.
And here we have a wonderful pasta making class at agriturismo.
My goodness.
Yes. And of course, many of them produce their own prosciutto, I believe, aged as well, and serve that. And in the chat and in the follow-up email, we have a list of a handful of websites for specific countries where you can go to find rural guest houses. Italy has this agriturismi website where you can select the region and then search in particular towns for different options. In France, which I will take us to here in just a moment, the gîte system is also very popular and widespread for longer stays. And there's a website to find gîtes across France as well, this type of systematic nationwide rural guest house where I believe you book for a week or more usually with gîtes. Right? Would you say, Jen, is that
Yeah, tend to be longer stays, yes, which is kind of great. I mean, one of my favorite things is to slow down your travels a little bit and stay put for a little. So the gîte actually really does encourage that. And I love that about them.
They come furnished, right? Great for families again. And actually our colleague, Steve Smith, who's kind of our Francophile, he's been a guest on Monday Night Travel several times. He has a great gîte in Burgundy, and he talks a little bit about it in the Burgundy MNT that we had.
Oh my, I'm going to check that out. I definitely, wow, that's amazing. There's so much insider intel there.
Next up, Jen, we will actually get a tour of your work, I believe, in Japan.
Hi, I'm Jen, and I'm here at the Hoshinoya Tokyo.
Hoshinoya Tokyo is in the Otemachi Financial District. Today, the neighborhood is filled with skyscrapers, but it's got centuries of history too. In fact, samurai from the mighty Tokugawa shogunate lived here between the 1600s and the 1800s. The exterior, a stunning lattice metal pattern based on a hemp leaf, is inspired by an auspicious Edo komon pattern that was once used on kimonos in the Edo period. This hotel is a true urban resort inspired by a ryokan, or traditional Japanese inn, which is normally found in rural settings. Even checking into the hotel is an experience unto itself. There's a large entrance hall with soaring ceilings and a wall of woven baskets that stretch all the way up. These woven baskets are for your shoes. You're asked to remove them, and you keep them off during your stay because all the hotel's floors, even the elevators, are covered with beautiful tatami mats. The idea is to encourage guests to leave the city behind and to become immersed in another world through all five senses.
Oh, Jen, this looks so incredible. I traveled.
The hotel has 84 rooms with 6 rooms per floor. The Kiku room.
There we go. I traveled through Japan, Jen, in 2019 and had such a wonderful time. I remember that one of my favorite parts of the experience was staying in a ryokan in Hakone, which is not too far from Tokyo.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was just wonderful. Can you describe a bit more about the ryokan
Yes,
experience and what that's like
absolutely.
and how it compares to a traditional hotel?
Yeah, so what you just saw is actually a really interesting modern interpretation of a ryokan in the center of Tokyo. And what's interesting about that is that ryokans were traditionally meant to be rural, kind of more like what we were talking about earlier, these like kind of rural stays where the meal part is central to these experiences, and you usually get like a hot bath, and you put a robe on, and you kind of spend your time like in this cozy little world filled with beautiful minimalist interiors. These days, as you can see, it's gotten a lot more luxurious, and you can also find them in cities like Tokyo and Kyoto, but I can't think of a better, more immersive way to experience a country's hospitality, especially in Japan, than like the ryokan. It is interesting. So you are sleeping on tatami floors and everything is kind of lower down. There are some ryokans these days that have Western style seating for people who aren't as comfortable doing that, but if you're willing to sleep on the ground, I promise it's like a really amazing, cozy experience as well, and kind of worth a try. It's just a really special kind of accommodation in Japan that I recommend, highly recommend.
Yeah, I would as well. And I didn't know that at least there were ryokan-esque options in the cities as well, because so many people don't go beyond, say, Tokyo and Kyoto, right? And so they never get to stay in a ryokan, but actually you can at least get feel for it with a place like Hoshinoya.
Yes, and if you find one with an onsen, which is the hot springs baths, it is amazing, especially if you're into health and wellness. It's a really great option because you are able to do these amazing soaks right kind of on the property, which is a really special part of the ryokan experience.
And the food as well that they often provide is excellent,
The
right?
food is amazing. This one, just you love to eat, don't you?
Well, I mean, come
It's the
on.
best part of travel. It
Yeah.
really is. Let's, you know.
Definitely high up there for sure.
Is the largest accommodation and fits up to 3 people. While children are more than welcome, littles who have a lot of energy might feel a little frustrated in the hushed atmosphere. Each floor was created to feel like its own private ryokan and has a shared tea area called an ochanama lounge. There, you'll find Japanese teas and snacks. And then there's the onsen, one of the most coveted features of this property. It's the only hotel in Tokyo with an onsen that's fed directly by hot springs close to 5,000 feet below the hotel. The onsen is separated by gender, and you need to give yourself a good scrub before you enter. The bath leads to an outdoor space where walls frame the sky above, and you can feel cool breezes at night. For dinner, I get a private room at the subterranean restaurant and am treated to a multi-course meal of Nippon cuisine that features fish and seasonal ingredients.
So that concludes our tour of the Hoshinoya Tokyo.
Jen, it's so wonderful to see you in your element.
Oh, thank you for watching. I'm very passionate about hotels, so thank you.
Yeah, I can see that. This was beautifully done as well. What was the experience of producing and creating this video like?
Oh, it was so fun. I mean, we have a little team at Afar and we get together and talk about hotels. We actually have one coming out on Paris at 5 different price points. So I will definitely try to share that around as well with your audiences. And Paris is just such a diverse city in terms of luxury to budget and steals, and you can find amazing things in kind of like every kind of price point there. So yeah, keep an eye out for that video. But yeah, we love producing these things. We love going in hotels, checking them out, sleeping in beds, which is so important before we recommend. Just like the Rick Steves team, I mean, you're sleeping in every single bed before you recommend anything to travelers, which is so valuable, I would say, to the travelers listening tonight.
Very true, that personal experience. Right. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing this clip with us.
Oh, thanks for your time.
And next, we'll go to a live Monday Night Travel correspondent in Dingle, our friend, our tour guide, and our hotelier, Stephen McPhillamy, who has been kind enough to share with us a few thoughts that he has about what it's like to run a hotel. And you'll hear a bit about that in a moment, but he has 2 hotels in different countries that he runs. It's quite the feat, I would say.
That's amazing. And he did this for us, just for
Yeah.
us, right? A couple of days ago. This is like hot off the presses,
Yes.
right? Oh,
Yes.
this is so great. I
Yes.
can't wait to hear what he has to say.
And I tried to increase the volume a little bit on Stephen's video, but you may want to turn up your volume at home just a bit. So hopefully you'll be able to hear it all right, and increasing your volume should help. Stephen is a gem.
Hello from Dingle Harbour. Warm greetings to all the Monday night travel team. It's the off season and we're closed up. We're getting ready for opening just before Easter time. I bought this hotel, this small guest house actually. We have 10 rooms. I bought it with my Irish American friend Patrick Wade 10 years ago. And we've had some really fun summers here since. We also bought a little hotel in Switzerland 3 years ago called Hotel Overland in Lauterbrunnen, and it's got 2 seasons. It's got ski season at the moment, and then of course a very busy summer season. Some people say to me, how do you operate 2 hotels at the same time? Is it not difficult? And to be honest, it's not, because I can easily travel between Switzerland and Dingle. It's only an hour's flight. It's just such a pleasure to host people. I love the concept of hosting. The Irish are particularly good at that, I find, culturally. It's something we take great pride in. And just to be able to host people, welcome them, fills you with pride. And of course, they're paying for the pleasure of staying with you. So there's enough to make a decent little living. Pay the staff, pay the expenses, pay everybody well, pay your bills, pay your taxes. And a little bit left over then to go and travel in the off season. The top 3 trends that I'm seeing these days is, number 1, online booking. Everybody is booking online. I don't think we've had a telephone call in 2 or 3 years here. The other trend is prices. Everything is going up. Prices are not coming down. Now our costs are going up, of course, as well, but the cost of staying in hotels has got a lot more expensive. And the other thing is experiences. People don't want to just come and stay in a hotel and just move on as much as they used to. And these days people want a little bit more. They want to meet the team. They want a whiskey tasting. They want a fondue tasting. They want to meet the Irish wolfhounds. We opened a falconry school in the garden to try and encourage our guests to stay a little bit longer. And what would be the top challenges for a hotelier? Well, here's my top 3. Number 1, again, prices. Because everything's going up, all the costs of electricity and staff, and of course you have to pay your staff fairly, so that's understandable that will rise. But the cost of electricity and utilities and taxes and everything is going up, so the prices have to go up. And that's a problem, because there will be a tipping point where guests don't want to pay too much, and you have to be careful with that. Number 2 challenge is accommodation. Years ago in Dingle and in Lauterbrunnen, where we have our Swiss hotel, there was an abundance of accommodation for summer staff, but all those spare bedrooms are now on Airbnb. And the people who used to rent them for €100 a week to a summer staff member are now renting them for €100 per night to a tourist. So that's really changed. There's loads of employment, but there's nowhere for these workers to live in the summertime. There's nowhere for locals to live, never mind seasonal staff coming in from elsewhere. So that's certainly a big issue. We love these hotels. They are our babies, and we always get very protective of them, and we want all guests to be happy. But overall, I think being a hotelier is the best job in the world. Aside from tour guiding, it's just brilliant being able to host people, being able to welcome people, and to be able to make a living from it. Farewell to all of you. Bye-bye, and take care. Sláinte.
Thank you, Stephen.
Oh my God. There's so many things I love about what Stephen had to say. I mean, first of all, can't you just imagine having a whiskey with him at the end of the day, just talking about I mean, with the Irish Wolfhound and talking about life in Dingle. Just, I don't know, just there's something so wonderful and magical about it. And also just to hear from him what it's like to be the owner of like accommodations in Ireland. I mean, there's just, something really interesting and cool about like kind of connecting the dots and saying, yeah, like my trip is going to impact the place that we're in. And if you kind of go with a local owner, that's going to mean that they're going to be taking care of their staff a little bit better, and the money's going to kind of stay locally. I mean, there's just so many things about what Stephen had to say that just touch on so many important points.
Very true, Jen. And I don't want to make you jealous, but I've stayed at Milltown House in Dingle
Oh,
with Stephen, and I've had a whiskey with him.
I am okay. This is my 2024 mission, is to have a whiskey with Stephen before the year's end in Ireland.
I'll connect you with him after the show.
Thank you.
And in fact, we've listed his Milltown House in the chat, and it'll also be in the follow-up email if you'd like to stay with him. And Dingle is such a wonderful place in
Oh,
Ireland. So this just checks all the boxes. Wonderful accommodation,
that's
beautiful place.
amazing.
And Stephen is, as I said before, an absolute gem. And I love the way he discussed hosting, right? This hotelier role of not just housing you, but hosting you. That's a beautiful thing as well.
It is a centuries old tradition or business, I guess, in some ways, but also just an act of generosity to host someone in the form of a hotel. Like the first traveler ever who probably ever stayed at a hotel probably just went to someone's home and said, can I stay here and will you give me a meal? I mean, it is such a centuries old, like millennia old tradition that I think that when done well can be such a wonderful experience for a traveler and for the hosts as well, which is equally as important. Be a good host and be a good guest.
Yeah, that's very true, Jen. One thing that Stephen touched on was Airbnb again, and also this idea that there's limited places to stay. And I don't know if you know this specifically, but I was just thinking that my impression has essentially been that in Ireland, there's kind of a bit of a housing pressure at the moment. Have you come across this as well?
A little bit. Yeah, it is a bit of a concern. Yeah, for sure. And I think hospitality plays a big role in that as well, and hotels. So
Yeah, I've seen it in Dublin as well, where
Mhm.
hotel prices are quite high and
Yeah.
can fill up quickly. Yeah.
Which goes back to our booking in advance if you want the maximum amount of choices, especially in high season. But
Right, right. And Stephen also touched on this idea of experiences, of hotels offering experiences, which we've discussed a bit before. But I'm curious, is this a broader trend that you're noticing?
Absolutely. I think that hotels are thinking about their guests beyond the four walls. So going back to this idea that the hotel is more than just a place to sleep. Oftentimes it'll be some member of staff who's going to point you in a direction, going to like an amazing restaurant or like an amazing shop or like whatever your interests are. But there's also more incentive for the hotels to kind of unlock experiences for travelers. So I think there's more willingness to kind of help you kind of figure out, like, if you have a certain interest, they're going to be willing, especially the concierge. Like the concierge's job, if you have a concierge at your hotel or the inn owner, their job is to help unlock a destination. They're living there, so they probably have connections. They probably know if you need a laundromat, if you need a certain type of meal, like, or if you want to get the best raclette in your region, like they'll point the way to this amazing off the beaten path place. And so I think, yeah, hotels going back to like why they're so important, they will unlock a destination for you in so many ways. And more are really consciously doing that now and offering kind of like structured programming around that as well.
Jen, you mentioned laundry, so I figured, well, I might as well ask you about it now because we get a lot of questions about it, to be honest. You know, many travelers are concerned, what am I going to do when I need to wash my clothes? Is this something that people should consider when booking a hotel, whether or not it offers a laundry service, or should they just know that, well, the hotel will have a recommendation nearby? What do you think?
I think that I was just talking to my partner about this. Having the ability to travel light is so liberating. You don't check a bag, nothing gets, I mean, I can't tell you how many times my bag got lost in 2023, but I am there's no more checking a bag for me. And so that does mean that if you're doing extended travel, like many of us like to do, you need to wash your clothes at some point. And I do think that you can find like hotels that offer that kind of service, but you can also ask your hotel or hostel if there's a laundromat nearby. So there are many ways to kind of get at it. Again, like if you're at a fancy hotel, usually you're going to get a very overpriced rate for anything laundered for you. But again, like there are some hotels that have laundry services. It's not as common as I'd want it to be, but they exist. And I would also, again, encourage maybe like looking at your location. Like, is your hotel near these kinds of facilities if that's something you're looking for? But yes, so liberating to be able to wash your clothes and to be able to pack light for sure.
Yeah, excellent tips there, Jen. I can remember doing different things at different times. You know, I've often had the hotel do it if I thought the price was reasonable. That was kind of my go-to because it's, you know, if it's a reasonable price, then that's the easiest thing for me to do, right? I'm using less of my time. I've had other times I can remember where I went to the front desk and they said, well, it's 75 euro. And I said, I don't know if I want to do that. So I asked them, you know, where's the closest place in town? But I suppose we could do it the Rick way as well and wash our clothes in the sink.
That is one of my favorite pieces of advice that Rick has given me over my years, having been a devotee of the Rick Steves brand. Bring a little Tide. You can kind of get away with doing it yourself once in a while. It's not a problem. There's no shame in it. Do it.
Very true. Very true. I haven't done it too many times myself. That should be one of my travel goals for 2024 is to wash my clothes in the sink.
Clothes in the
Yeah,
sink, yeah.
Well, Jen, I would like us to have a robust Q&A shortly. So before we transition to that, I do want to just have a quick word from our sponsor. And we've touched on the importance of guidebooks already. I just want to highlight our newly updated Krakow, Warsaw, and Gdansk
Oh
snapshot.
my goodness.
This is one of my favorite regions of Europe, and it exemplifies the hard work that we do to get these guidebooks going and printed and just have the best information they can. I actually had the pleasure of being a guidebook researcher in 2023, where I ran around and got to understand the lay of the land of hotels in a particular city. I did it for Helsinki and Tallinn. And essentially, with that information, I can then choose which hotels I think should be put in the book. So for us, it's a very hands-on, on the ground approach to picking good hotels.
And you lived in Poland for a while,
I did, yeah. I
right?
studied
That's
abroad
amazing.
about
Wow.
two blocks from this main square.
I think you're the expert. Like I would want your advice on this because you live there, you've researched the guidebooks, you know probably every nook and cranny of these destinations.
Well,
That's amazing.
Well, thanks, Jen. I don't specialize in hotels like you do, but Poland, I do know reasonably well. So we're very happy that this book is out in a new edition. And like all of our guidebooks, we list our recommendations and then the website so that you can book directly. And that allows you to skip the middleman, which as Rick mentioned earlier, they take a 15 to 20% cut. Oftentimes the hotel will offer you a better price, maybe even 15 or 20% better, because they don't have to give it to a middleman. So to our point earlier, good to book direct. You can find the way to book direct in our books. Okay, you ready for a good Q&A, Jan?
Let's do it.
Okay, well, Gabe has been kind enough to be sending me many questions. Oh, here's a good one. We commonly see, maybe in Southern Europe a little bit more often, when reserving a hotel via email, they want the credit card information, and people are uncomfortable about submitting their credit card information in an email. Do you have any thoughts on that or a workaround?
Definitely. I just get on the phone. I think that that's the best, most like the kind of easiest, most safe way to give credit card information for sure.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's excellent. So Laura is asking this, have small accommodations, pensions, and hostels survived the pandemic?
Oh man, I mean, there are some heartbreaking stories. Unfortunately, for people like I definitely heard them around the pandemic. But I think with the resurgence of travel to Europe, they're experiencing like I mean, there's a lot more kind of financial support now. They're doing a lot better for sure. But for a while, it was touch and go. I think it was quite difficult to keep businesses open because if you only have 6 rooms, it's almost impossible to just stay open or to kind of gamble on just think about not knowing when you were going to be able to open doors again. So there was like, I mean, I think we saw this in the pandemic where the hospitality industry lost a lot of talent because there wasn't work. And so there was a talent shortage, there was a business shortage, there were a lot of kind of challenges. So yeah, I unfortunately there were some pensiones and B&Bs that were amazing that closed, but luckily we're seeing these record numbers, which, you know, it's kind of the opposite problem now, but
Right, right.
yeah, but we're seeing the silver lining in that for sure.
Very true. Yeah, travel is back with a vengeance, indeed.
Mhm.
And I think it's amazing to see how hotels have adjusted to the reality of the last, I guess it's the last 4 years. When I was doing guidebook research in Tallinn, a number of the staff in these hotels in Estonia were Ukrainian. They were refugees and they were being employed by hotels. And I think that I thought that that was just incredible. And just goes to show you that, supporting these locally run hotels, kind of it goes on, right? The good goes on when you do that.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. I mean, I can't think of a better kind of hospitality too, when the hospitality again is in the back of the house as well as the front of the house. That's incredible. That's an incredible story.
Jen, what is the most memorable place you've stayed?
Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. Well, you're going to see a trend here, but I love Italy and I love Japan. I stayed at a very beautiful, God, an incredible ryokan outside of Kyoto, about an hour by car in like through a cypress forest on top of a river, a rushing river. So my room was right over a river and it had this kind of shoji screens and the tatami floors. And so when I went to sleep at night in my little kind of robe, my cozy robe, and they put a hot water bottle in my bed, I would just listen to the sounds of the river. And before I went to bed, I was having this incredible dinner in a beautiful, quiet room where everything came from the forest. So we had carp sashimi, we had ginkgo nuts, we were literally tasting our destination. So I just found, I think about that now, and it was fall, and I just get shivers. It's just like one of the most beautiful expressions of hospitality I've experienced, and just such a special place, and very food focused. You would very much enjoy it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, on a similar note, this might be tricky. Who is the most memorable person you've met at a hotel or
Oh
accommodation?
gosh, that is so hard to answer because there are so many people I have met, just staying at hotels, and often, it's like the staff, like you become friends with staff in a lot of ways. And one particular experience actually happened to be in East Africa. I know we're in a new region, we haven't talked about as much tonight, but I was staying in a camp, and my guide, who is Maasai, his name is Nelson, and I still, whenever I'm in the region, I try to check in through someone knows Nelson, so I check in. I'm like, how's Nelson doing? And we'll get on the phone a little bit. So he's a dear friend now, but he was trying to teach me Swahili while we were out in the bush, and we're kind of sitting having breakfast, watching kind of the landscapes and the zebras and everything. And I asked him for a cup of coffee and mistook the word coffee for diarrhea. I switched the words diarrhea and coffee. So I was actually asking for diarrhea instead of coffee, which is very, very, there were a lot of laughs, and, but I will never mess that up again for sure. But it's those things where you're kind of, what I loved about Nelson and my experience getting to know him is, his job was to guide me through the landscape. He also was a full-time cattle herder. That's with the Maasai, the cattle are your bank account. They're a very important part of your life. So they was kind of had a foot in both worlds. And I was able to kind of like get a little bit inside and make him laugh, and he made me laugh. And we kind of like broke down those like kind of service barriers, as it were. And it just made for such an enriching experience for both of us. And that's the kind of magic that you can have. Like I think one of my pieces of advice there is you can make incredible connections if you put yourself out there a little bit and are willing to kind of like, maybe make a little mistake, try a language, try a new word. And it's so fun how people in your hotel will just like open up to that and laugh with you. And it feels more like family than kind of like a hotel.
Yeah, that is super memorable. That is amazing, Jen. I will actually answer this question as well.
Oh, yes, I want to know yours too.
Well, at a hostel, a Jugendherberg, actually, in Germany, in Lübeck, which is an excellent city, by the way. Lübeck is stunning. That's the former Hanseatic city in northern Germany. I had a fellow resident for the night above above me in the bunk bed.
Mhm.
And I was just listening to him, and his English was perfect, but I could tell he was German. And I said, he was a little older, and I was curious just to know about him. So I started chatting. It turned out he had just retired as the director of food safety for Germany, and he worked for the Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Oh
And
my
and here he
goodness.
was in this, youth hostel with me up in the bed above me. And
Oh,
he was hiking from the border of Germany and Denmark to the border of, I believe it was Austria and Germany. So
okay.
through the whole country. And he was just getting started. He was there for a few nights. And every night while we were there, each of us 3 nights, I believe, he took me out to a beer. I
Oh
got
my
I
goodness.
got to know him. We had discussion about food safety in Germany versus the US. And he's invited me to visit him at his home, which is near Bonn
Oh
in
my
Western Germany.
gosh,
So,
that's
yeah. We
amazing.
stayed in touch from 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess true. All walks of life stay at hostels still. You never know who you're going to run into at a hostel.
True.
That's amazing. And you connected on fashion points, right?
Yeah.
You connected on, that's amazing. What a great experience. Yeah.
Jen, what would you say are the latest trends in accommodation?
Oh my goodness. Well, definitely going back to the sort of price point side of things. We did see huge record numbers in terms of prices in Europe, and that is going to kind of even out, which is good. We're also still seeing a lot of multi-generational travel. A lot of hotels are getting requests for adjoining rooms, kind of multi-room units, things like that. Like I think we are using travel as more of a way to connect with people we love. I also am noticing a lot more co-working spaces in or near hotels. Like you're seeing a lot of digital nomads who don't necessarily want to just travel for pleasure. They also want to kind of live and work. And we actually have some staffers at Afar that do that. One in particular has been in Italy. She's been in the Philippines. She's been kind of all over. She's been very itinerant, which has been really fun, especially for a travel magazine. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of um, hotels responding to people wanting to live this more kind of digital nomad life, which I find quite interesting.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Just reviewing here, we have a good question from Tracy. And I've been wondering this as well a little bit. I don't normally do it. Tracy is curious, should you reconfirm hotels after booking and before traveling, or is that unnecessary these days?
I'm a bit of a kind of confirmer. I do like to confirm. I do like to check in with a hotel and just make sure that I can find some sort of evidence that I booked that hotel. Like maybe you don't have to get the voice confirmation, but I think if you have something in hand where you can show the hotel that you did have a confirmation number or like some sort of like contractual like booking, like it can be just an email that says you were confirmed for these nights. Like I would double check the nights. I have made the mistake of booking the wrong nights. So sometimes if you want to kind of check on that and make sure that your dates are correct, that's also good. Just a kind of like a self-edit thing just to make sure that all is good. It's just that one extra little edit that you can do before you go on a trip and spend a lot of money that I think would be wise. Yeah.
Excellent point. Yeah. And just having that email and knowing that it's there is very handy. So you can go back to it and reference it. Okay. Let's see. Christina asks, are there any design trends that Jen sees in Europe among new hotels?
Yes. So it's really interesting. I think for a long time, hotels were going in this sort of minimalism direction, like lots of like beige wall. And then there's nothing wrong with beige walls and minimalism. I think it's so beautiful. Scandinavia does this so well. But I'm actually seeing a lean towards a little bit of like kind of sophisticated maximalism, which means pattern next to pattern, bolder colors. You'll see this a lot in Paris. There's a designer in the kind of luxury space named Martin Brudzinski, who has designed several Paris hotels and actually a couple in New York. I mean, he's a very prolific designer, but is known for that maximalist style. And if you're looking at that category, Kit Kemp in London is also, and New York, she also has New York hotels, is very maximalist. So I would say you're going to see more color. You're going to see more patterns, a little bit. And again, there's always that minimalist. There's something beautiful about entering a minimalist space. So you'll still see a lot of that as well. But definitely people are getting bolder with their designs, which is really fun.
Yeah, fascinating how that's come around a little bit again. Jen, what are your feelings about apartment rentals logistically and ethically? And we did kind of discuss this a bit, but I'm wondering, just to get you started on answering the question, maybe beyond Airbnb and VRBO,
Mhm.
there are other ways to find apartments, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is an interesting, there is the sort of apartment swap, which is always an interesting thing. It's not a world I know too well, but I do know people. There's a writer I work with who has a home in Istanbul and kind of trades her place for a place in London sometimes, and it's a really fun, affordable way. If you think maybe someone might want to stay in your place or a summer home that you have or whatever, you can kind of see if there's really interesting ways to kind of do the residential feeling stay that goes beyond just the Airbnbs or the Verbos or yep, for sure. But that's kind of one I'm just thinking off the top of my head. That's really cool. And there are actually more structured, this is a little bit more in the splurgy space, but like a one fine stay is a company that runs higher end. They have apartments owned by people that they kind of curate the experience for. So you're not walking in from a peer-to-peer standpoint. You have like someone who's making sure it's kind of consistent across the board. It's called One Fine Stay. So that's another kind of interesting option. Yeah, and then you also have like some hotels that are built to feel more like apartments, like ones with kitchenettes, that kind of thing. So, maybe you're looking for an apartment vibe. You can also kind of find those in hotels sometimes too.
Yeah, yeah, very good points, Jen. Also, I would say in some of our guidebooks, we do list apartment rental options, agencies that similarly to, what was it, One Fine
One
Stay?
Fine Stay,
One
yeah.
Fine Stay,
Mhm.
have these groups of apartments. So
Mhm.
in Rick Steves' guidebooks, particularly for major cities like London and Paris, we do
Mhm.
list a few options. Grant would like to know, do hotels in Europe generally offer hearty breakfasts?
Hearty breakfasts. I have had, this is just my experience for the most part, yes. Compared to America, I would say that it's more of the sort of the default that you're going to have some sort of hearty breakfast. I mean, trying to think of any example. I mean, like here and there, it can be a little bit light, but for the most part, I feel like I've been pretty well fed. How about you? Do you feel like when you have a hotel breakfast in Europe, it's pretty hearty? Yeah.
I would say generally, yes,
Yeah.
particularly in the north. I'd say throughout the
Mm-hmm.
north, not
Mm-hmm.
just in England and Ireland, but through Scandinavia, Germany. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
the breakfasts tend to be quite hearty, often buffet style, and I love them.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people, I think even locals in Scandinavia,
Mhm.
when they want breakfast, they'll just buy the hotel breakfast. They're not staying at the hotel, but they'll go to a hotel to eat breakfast.
Uh-huh.
Because unlike in the United States, there's not
Yeah.
these actual breakfast
Mhm.
restaurants.
Mhm.
Whereas in Southern Europe, my impression has always been that it's a little bit more minimalist. I'd say
Yeah.
in Italy, maybe you don't find
Yeah,
such a big spread.
it is lighter because when I lived in Italy, like none of us ate breakfast. We had a cornetto and a macchiato, and then we went. Like we were, it's not a big breakfast culture as much, maybe, but yeah, it's definitely it can vary. But I would say like I've been pretty lucky on my hotel breakfasts.
Yeah, nothing like it.
Yeah,
That's my favorite
gosh,
part.
it's so true.
So we have time for just one more question, Jen, and it's from Paul. We've been so focused on locally run places. I think
Mhm.
he's curious, can there be any advantages to staying in brand network hotels when traveling, even though they don't have the same local character?
Yes, I will say that you can get good rates at a brand focused hotel, and a lot of hotels that are locally owned might also join a brand because of just business reasons. Like maybe they have a kind of like more mass brand on top of it, but like it's a locally owned hotel, they're going to give you a good breakfast. I mean, there are those, I mean, there is a benefit to playing the loyalty game in terms of like getting points. Like it's still, I mean, airlines is another story, loyalty, but hotels, like you can still get really good loyalty kind of benefits from hotels. So if you're loyal to Marriott or Hyatt or whatever those kind of, or like Accor, like any of those bigger brands, they'll often give you free upgrades. They'll often, be more flexible on cancellation policies. They'll sometimes let you check in earlier. So the VIP game is a little bit better. Again, if you've tried any airline stuff in the last few years, it's just like not worth it. It's like a nightmare. I mean, I still do it, but yeah, there's definitely a benefit to it. And I wouldn't rule them out because I do think that those worlds are kind of combining. They're kind of blurring a little bit where you think that you're staying at like kind of a big kind of corporate hotel, but then you're actually getting kind of a local experience. So yeah, like I would kind of keep that open for sure. Like keep that as part of your options for sure.
Interesting. That's a great tip. Thank you so much, Jen. It's
Sure.
been such a pleasure to discuss accommodations with you. You're so knowledgeable, you're so well-traveled. We just appreciate you taking the time to to provide us with all these experiences and information. Thank you so
This
much.
this has been so fun. Thank you so much for listening, and happy travels.
Happy travels, everyone. Please join us next week for a wonderful and interesting, insightful presentation with Rick Steves and the president of Bread for the World. Good night, Jan. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.